Hello, Salesforce developers. My name is John Dillon, and we're here to talk about Apex programming. Channel's been quiet for a little while. I've had a lot of life events happening, including a move across the country. So hopefully we'll be back onto a more consistent schedule now. So the topic we're going to cover today is using custom metadata to do system configuration in your instance, and how you can use that in your, or how you access it and use it in your Apex code. So what we're going to do now, let's take a look at the code. We're going to visit, this is something we've used in a previous video, so it doesn't necessarily matter what we were going for at the time, but you can see here we've got this, something we're checking on the contact. We've got a contact, and we're checking to see if the title matches certain criteria, CEO, CFO, CIO, then we're going to do something with it. In this case, we set the contact VIP field to true. So this is fine, and it worked for our purpose, but it's not a great way to do something for the long term. In a business, there are certain rules and business logic that you might that might change over time, and while it is possible to go back and edit your code anytime those things change, it's a better idea if you can think forward a little bit, and imagine that some aspects of your system you might want to change using configuration, or to make a declarative change and not with code. So that's the example we're going to look at today. So here, instead of having hard-coded these three values for what constitutes a VIP in our system, we should store that somewhere else, and that somewhere else is custom metadata. So when we switch to our setup in Salesforce, we can search for metadata in your setup, and you'll find custom metadata types. Here we don't have any, so we're going to create a new one. And I will say I do this in just about every instance I touch. If I'm working on a project, if they don't already have something like this set up, I usually set it up pretty quickly, because you normally run into a case where you need this pretty early in the project. So I'm going to call my custom metadata system config. And when it starts out, you get your standard fields. So we're going to add a custom field. So the custom field that we're going to use in this case, we can base it off of what we're doing in our Apex code. And we're looking for basically VIP criteria, titles that will give us a VIP. So, kind of looking at how you're going to use it will help you figure out what to call the field that you're working with. So within custom metadata, the fields can be like any other fields on any other object. For this purpose, we're just going to use a text field. That's going to totally suit our purpose. Okay, so we've created a field for VIP roles, any role that we want to consider to be a VIP. And to actually populate it with the data, we need to click on Manage System Configs. So right now we created the object, we created the object definition, but now we're actually going to create the object itself. And we can call this anything we want. I'm going to call it main config. And then for the data, what we're going to put in here is a list of roles that we want to basically consider VIP roles. And what I'm going to do is just separate them by a semicolon. So we had CEO, CIO, and CFO. We save it. In the code, we're going to replace this line with, I'm actually going to do a call out to a method that I'm going to create. That way we don't have to put a whole bunch of code, replacing one line of code with several. If you're going to do that, consider breaking it out into its own method. So we're going to make a method called, first I'm going to steal this stuff. So at this point, we want to pull in the custom metadata that we've created. Actually, before we do that, let's just save it to make sure we're not getting any errors. Ah, yes, we need to return. Just for now, just so we can compile, I'm gonna give ourselves a return statement, and I'm going to paste the logic that we stole from the other part of this file. So the next thing we need to do is actually access that from the custom metadata. If we look at the custom metadata type itself, this is the API name that we're going to be working with. So that's going to be important for us to use. So what we do is we'll set up an array of configs. I know there's only one, but what this is returning is a list, so we'll just deal with that in just a minute. You used to need to query this as a table, but in I think it was version 56 or 57 on, we can actually do this shorthand to get it. So we do metadata name, API name, we do get all, and we pull in the values, and we store that in this list. So here what we're doing is a safe dereference of this query. We're pulling in a list of things. We make sure that the list has more than one object, and then we pull the first one. If we didn't do this check and it was empty, we would get an error here. And now what we're going to do is look to see if this logic works out. So a couple of options here. We can do, we delimited the string with semicolons, so we could split the string using semicolons and loop through. That's one way to handle it. Another way would be just to do grab that string and do a contains. The contains is easier, but you could actually run into some trouble if you've got several values in here that are, say, similar. Like, let's say this was a color scheme and you had gray and light gray. Because there's some overlap, doing contains might cause you some problems depending on what your situation is. So let's do the slightly more difficult version of splitting the string. So again, we're going to do a safety check and make sure that we have something in that roles field before we work on it. And then what we can do is we can loop through and see if we get a hit. And we can compare it to what was sent in to this. Oh, I shouldn't reuse that. We're going to call this title. because that's what we're passing in here. So if the role that we get from our role string matches the title, we get a hit, we can return true. So as soon as we hit 1, we know we can just return true. So we'll just do that, and otherwise we're going to return false if we can't find one, or we don't have a hit, or we have some other issue. And one other safety check I should do, since I'm doing a reference on title using title dot, I have to make sure title is never null. And I'll do that right at the top of the method. So there we have it. We've got the logic. Is VIP role, do a safety check on the title. We grab our system config values. From the values, we get the roles field that we had populated. And we know this is each of those 3 items, titles, separated by a semicolon. We split them up on the semicolon, loop through those. If we get a hit, we can return true. And if we never get a hit, or if we run into some other issues, we're just going to return false. And we had placed that is VIP role here in the if statement, where we used to do a string compare. So now let's test this out. Okay, so we already have a unit test in place to set the VIP status, and we can check if the VIP flag gets set. So that's one of the nice things about doing unit tests, is we can test this very quickly simply by running the test. And if you haven't seen this before, let me know, and I'll link in the comments where the video is that covers this piece. And our unit test passed, so we know this works. Again, the good thing about this is, let's say next week someone says, you know, CEO, CFO, and CIO, we also want to add, you know, COO. We can just add it here in the system config, and we don't need to recompile or retest any of our classes. You probably want to test, you know, your functions, you know, from your user's point of view, but that's it. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. I use this all the time, and it is a much better approach, much more maintainable than simply embedding all of your business logic in your Apex code. Certain things that you expect to maybe change over time, you want to pull those out into a custom metadata type and system in a system config similar to this. So if you have any questions on this, feel free to put them in the comments. Any suggestions, or you know, if you're having anything unrelated Apex questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. If you're new to Apex, or even if you've been doing it for a while, feel free to check out the free mini course that I offer. The link is in the description to this video and being shown on the screen right now. So check that out, and I will talk to you next time.